I realize I don't usually make these kinds of videos, but it's not every day a game I love gets remade after more than 20 years. It's time to overthink and overanalyze and probably misinterpret the trailer for the MediEvil remake. Right off the bat, the music is a track from the original game, but it's not quite the same. It doesn't sound just like the original track. The structure's off, which is likely due to editing since they're trying to make it fit for the length of the trailer. There's this weird crossfade around the 10-second mark where it jumps to a later part of the song. Aside from that, it sounds like the song's been re-recorded with an actual orchestra instead of the synthesized sounds from the first go-around. If you haven't heard the original MediEvil soundtrack, give it a listen. It's great. There are some tracks where it's easy to forget that they aren't actually playing instruments. The first shot is a bunch of sleeping wolves in what is part of the Return to the Graveyard stage, and it's here I'd like to note something about what was and wasn't shown. The majority of the footage in the trailer happens in 3 levels. This one, the Graveyard, and Cemetery Hill. In other words, 3 of the first 4 or 5 stages. This specific area with the Undertaker's sign appears 4 times, 6 if you count the fenced-in area directly above it. The only other levels shown are brief clips of the Enchanted Earth, pools of the ancient dead, and what might be the Hilltop Mausoleum. It's hard to tell. Even though the music is the theme from the Scarecrow Fields level, that wasn't shown. Either later levels weren't ready for showtime yet, or Sony's holding back to reveal more down the line. This is a clip of what can be assumed is the animation before the main menu, considering, well, it looks just like the originals. I want to focus on the stained glass behind Dan's resting place for a moment. There was a stained glass something in the original, but you couldn't get a good look at it because it was too far in the background and the lighting made it hard to make out any details. I'm just curious if the dragon he's fighting in the image is of any relation to the dragon he fights later in the game to get the dragon armor. Now let's look at Dan. It's immediately apparent his armor is showing its age. But it's also got these brass and/or bronze and/or gold accents that weren't there before. Something else that's apparent is he's physically different. He has 5 fingers now instead of 4, and his eye is quite clearly blue when before it was either colorless or some shade of brown or gray. The gameplay clips show Dan's running animation, which is a bit reminiscent of Homer's strut, and some of the enemies, mostly wolves and zombies. Some zombies look like dead grandpas, some look like Dirk the Daring got a game over, and there are the headless, deceptively fast bastards. Rather than just emitting a light that flies off somewhere when killed, there seem to be a couple different animations for when their souls leave their bodies, and they appear to be unique to certain units. The grandpa souls do a twirl, the Dirk souls salute, and I think there's a universal jumping back animation for humanoid enemies because both the grandpas and the Dirks do it in the trailer. What did catch my eye is a quick clip of Dan slaying a zombie, but no soul leaving its body. I can't remember if that was a thing or not in the original. Also, extra destructible environment pieces. Was that knocking over a tombstone's bad luck? Well, what's a little bad luck to Sir Daniel I died in the first charge Fortescue? Not many of Dan's weapons were shown, but he has his sword, obviously, throwing daggers, club, and hammer all getting a bit of screen time, as well as the copper, silver, and gold shields. It looks like the same light beacon targeting system for ranged weapons from before is in place, if the dagger scenes are any indication. Now I'm just wondering if it's fully automatic or if there's a way to manually switch targets. And for that matter, can you control the camera in more than one direction? I realize this is minor, but look, Dan has a proper pushing animation instead of a recycled blocking animation. Something that worries me a little is that in the Enchanted Earth clip, it's really hard to see Dan's shadow when he lands on each platform. The original had a constant shadow underneath him to help with judging distances and gauging when you're going to land on a platform. But if the lighting is facing the wrong way, it could have a negative impact on the ability to tell where Dan is in the air. The Pools of the Ancient Dead clip shows Dan getting bumped back, but he either collides with the inches-high edging or an invisible wall. I really hope there aren't invisible walls here, and instead they just make better use of Dan's animation where he gets too close to an edge and he halts himself before falling off. Also, a lack of invisible walls would make speedrunning more interesting. Like a magician keeping your focus away from where the magic happens, this clip gives a background glimpse at the health fountains. One thing's for sure, they certainly look a lot less like a fountain of jello pellets. In the Guardians of the Graveyard clip, usually you can see the gargoyle head beyond the gates, but in the remake clip, it's not visible. Well, there's an indistinct shadow which could end up being a gargoyle head, and even then it could just be an optical illusion of the gates. And I don't know why they would change that of all things, but it's just a little odd. The gold hidden behind this pillar is also in the original game, which could mean that some amount of the remake is a direct one-to-one remake of the original, even down to things like item placement. I hope the life bottle animation doesn't take up this much of the screen in the final product, or that's going to get really annoying, even if part of it is translucent. Dan's eye is constantly looking up when he's got the shield ready, presumably because when he's not moving and he has the shield up, he's kneeling. And off to your left in the background, we get a first glimpse of the life vials. And they have this weird ethereal glow to them. Dan's head and spine separate in this falling animation. Nice little detail. The same goes for the gesturing of the rune hands when you don't have what they're looking for. The club operates the same way around fire as before, and some bodies move as Dan steps around them. Collision error, perhaps? It didn't quite look natural. And of course the exploding skull chests. Even more so an explosion this time than a magical energy pulse like it was before. Good! Dan doesn't have his goofy, cartoony MediEvil 2 voice and actually sounds like a guy who has no lower jaw. And the final clip is Dan crushing a reanimated hand, which damn well better still give a little gold like it did in the original. Overall, we didn't actually see much, but the remake's looking pretty good so far. I do have my concerns, but they're largely due to a lack of information, which should be forthcoming in the months leading up to the release. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up coming out later in 2019, like around October, not just because the original MediEvil came out then, but because of the work left to do on it. If that's the case, then I'm hoping that for E3, Sony puts out another excessively elaborate presentation with a live orchestra and a life-sized animatronic Sir Dan who does his spin attack to break the chastity belt of cross-platform play on PS4s. Hey, a guy can dream, right?